The Philippines, April 16, 1945. It is 04:45 hours, and the humid air hangs heavy with salt water and burnt metal. Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka crouches low behind the rusted remains of his tank, artillery fire roaring across the jungle. The ground shakes beneath his boots. Sweat streams down his face, stinging his eyes as he wipes it away with trembling hands. His men have retreated into the shadows of crumbled stone buildings, their faces worn, eyes hollow from days of unrelenting battle. An American assault is imminent. His tank, the Shinhoto Chiha, has one last burst of life left in its damaged engine. The odds are insurmountable, but he must stand. Honor demands it. A radio crackles, static cutting through the chaos. "We need that position held. Do not retreat." The voice is distant, disembodied. Hiroshi's fingers tighten around his rifle, and for a moment his thoughts drift. Can we even survive this? His diary lies nearby, its pages waiting for the final entry. The night is silent save for the distant rumble of American B-29 bombers overhead. It is 02 hours on April 15, 1945, in what remains of Manila. Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka sits in his makeshift office, a cluttered corner of a damaged stone house. A dim light flickers from a single bulb, casting long shadows across the room. Hiroshi's hand hovers over his diary, its pages stiff and well-worn from months of constant use. He had started writing it not long after the Americans pushed them back across the Philippines. The battle had raged on since October, but the situation had only worsened with each passing week. He writes, but his thoughts do not follow the ink. His men are exhausted beyond measure. The tanks that once commanded the battlefield are little more than rusting skeletons now, stripped of parts and fuel. His own crew runs on fumes, both mentally and physically. Outside, the air smells of smoke and desperation, the earth beneath them riddled with battle scars. Hiroshi can hear the unmistakable sound of distant artillery, muffled but constant, an eerie sound that has become all too familiar in recent months. At the other end of the room, Sergeant Miyamoto pores over a map, his fingers tracing the positions of American forces with methodical precision. The enemy's strategy is clear. Encircle them, cut off supply lines, force them into submission or annihilation. Hiroshi knows it, feels it in his bones, with the certainty of a soldier who has seen this pattern before. He has been in these situations before, but this time there is no escape route visible on any map. "Sir," Miyamoto's voice breaks through his thoughts with quiet urgency. "They'll hit us at dawn. They always do." Hiroshi looks up, meeting Miyamoto's gaze directly. It is a look he has seen before in the eyes of soldiers preparing for their final fight. The recognition passes between them without further words needed. Records would later show that Japanese positions in this sector numbered fewer than 200 men, with limited ammunition and 3 operational tanks. The supply situation had become critical by mid-April, with no reinforcements expected from the north. The first sound of battle is the heavy thrum of American aircraft engines, cutting through the morning air. It is 07:30 hours on April 15, 1945, on the outskirts of Manila. Hiroshi and his crew scramble to their posts with practiced urgency. The tank's engine rumbles to life, but it is sluggish and reluctant, as if even the machinery can feel the exhaustion that has set into the bones of the men who maintain it. The Shinhoto Chiha lurches forward with a grinding protest, its turret swiveling toward the jungle line where movement has been detected. The first volley of American fire rains down from artillery positions to the east, shaking the ground beneath their treads with explosive force. His crew fights to maintain composure under the barrage. Atsushi, the gunner, wipes his brow repeatedly, sweat mixing with the grime of weeks in the field. He is pale, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and the constant strain of combat. Hiroshi feels a pang of guilt watching his men. These soldiers have seen too much, fought too long without rest, and their resolve is beginning to crack under the pressure. He can see it in the way their hands tremble slightly on the controls, in the tightness around their eyes. "Hold the line," Hiroshi orders, his voice hard and commanding. But inside his chest, doubt churns like acid. Minutes pass with agonizing slowness, and the sounds of gunfire grow steadily louder, closer with each exchange. The Americans are coming in force. Hiroshi's hand tightens around the commander's controls, knuckles white with tension. He knows with brutal clarity that their tanks, old and outdated by current standards, have little chance against the more advanced American armor and overwhelming firepower. The Type 97 Chiha tank, even in its improved Shinhoto variant, was designed for a different kind of war. Yet he is here, and he cannot abandon his men to face this alone. He will not. The Shinhoto Chiha lurches forward again, its tracks grinding against the muddy earth, leaving deep ruts in its wake. Artillery shells burst in the tree line ahead, sending up plumes of dirt and shattered wood. The sound is deafening, overwhelming all attempts at verbal communication beyond shouted orders. The jungle around them has fallen into an eerie calm, the quiet before the inevitable storm. It is 11:45 hours on April 16, 1945, near the Philippine coast where the land meets the sea in a tangle of vegetation and rocky outcrops. Hiroshi watches the horizon with shallow breaths, the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders like physical force. In the distance he can hear the faint but unmistakable hum of American tanks rolling closer through the jungle paths. Their tracks cut through the dirt like a constant, inevitable drumbeat marking time toward confrontation. Hiroshi knows with grim certainty that this moment represents his last stand. If he can hold the defensive line for even a few more hours, reinforcements might arrive from the northern positions. But deep down, he knows such hope is unlikely to materialize. His fingers brush across the pages of his diary, the leather cover soft from years of handling and sweat. The ink on the last entry is smudged from humidity and his own perspiration. He cannot remember the last time he wrote in it with anything resembling hope for the future. Today, however, he writes as if the words might mean something to someone after it is all over, as if the record itself matters. The radio crackles again with static and interference. The voice on the other end, distant but clear enough to understand. Hold your ground. The order is simple, absolute, and offers no alternatives or escape. Hiroshi acknowledges the transmission and sets the handset down carefully. Around him, his remaining crew members check their weapons and ammunition with the methodical movements of experienced soldiers. They do not speak unnecessarily. The air tastes of salt and cordite, the coastal breeze carrying the smell of battle from positions to the south, where fighting has been continuous for days. Intelligence reports had indicated that American forces were advancing with M4 Sherman tanks and concentrated infantry support. The disparity in capability was stark and undeniable. Yet orders were orders, and honor dictated that ground given would be sold at the highest possible price. The Shinhoto Chiha lurches violently as it takes a direct hit from an unseen position. It is 13:30 hours on April 16, 1945, still on the outskirts of Manila, where defensive positions have begun to collapse. The engine sputters and coughs, sparks flying from its damaged sides, where armor plating has been compromised. Hiroshi's heart races with sudden adrenaline as the implications become clear. A direct hit to the engine compartment. He hears the frantic shouts of his crew members as the machine grinds to a halt with a final shuddering protest. They have taken damage, critical damage that cannot be repaired under fire, But the battle is far from over around them. Hiroshi grips his rifle tightly, unwilling to let the fight end like this in mechanical failure. In the distance, through the smoke and haze, the American tanks approach steadily, their silhouettes looming large and menacing, their turrets swinging methodically toward the disabled Japanese positions. Hiroshi's hands tremble, despite his efforts to control them, his mind racing through tactical options that narrow with each passing second. He orders his men to dismount immediately, moving quickly into whatever cover the terrain provides. The tank is useless now as a fighting vehicle, but the fight itself is still his to wage. "We will fight to the end," Hiroshi says, his voice raw from shouting over the noise of battle. There is no more time to think or plan beyond immediate survival and resistance. The battle becomes a blur of gunfire exchanges, explosions that shake the earth, and the oppressive heat of the tropical sun beating down without mercy. He watches a fellow soldier fall to incoming fire, the man's body crumpling without ceremony. The weight of every death, every loss among his men, bears down on Hiroshi with crushing psychological force. American infantry can be seen advancing through the jungle vegetation, moving with coordinated precision that speaks to superior training and supply situations. The defensive position is untenable, but retreat has been forbidden by command. Records would later indicate that tank losses in this sector reached 90% by mid-April, with surviving crews forced into infantry roles. Hiroshi pulls his remaining men into a makeshift defensive position behind the wreckage of their disabled tank. It is 15 hours on April 16, 1945, near a river crossing that has become a focal point of American advance. The sound of American fire becomes deafening as multiple weapons concentrate on their location. But amid the chaos and confusion, Hiroshi realizes something critical. His crew's machine guns are running dangerously low on ammunition. They cannot maintain effective defensive fire with standard equipment much longer. Hiroshi's mind races through possibilities, searching for solutions that do not exist in the supply chain. In the chaos of battle, something familiar clicks in his memory from technical training years ago. He orders Atsushi to quickly disassemble a damaged American machine gun lying nearby among the debris of earlier fighting. The metal pieces are grimy and broken, but potentially salvageable for desperate purposes. They become tools in practiced hands despite their foreign origin. Hiroshi quickly begins assembling a crude, but potentially functional weapon, a hybrid creation combining pieces of both Japanese and American technology in ways never intended by either nation's engineers. It is risky and dangerous improvisation, and possibly a death sentence if the weapon malfunctions or if they are caught violating protocols, but it is their only chance to maintain suppressive fire against the advancing enemy. The enemy continues to advance relentlessly through the defensive perimeter, and Hiroshi's hands move with steady purpose, his mind focused completely on the mechanical problem before him. This invention, this desperate makeshift weapon cobbled together under fire, could potentially turn the immediate tactical tide if it functions as intended, if they can hold their position long enough for the weapon to make a difference. Atsushi works beside him, sorting through ammunition types and attempting to match calibers to the hybrid weapon's chamber specifications. The technical challenge is significant under ideal conditions, nearly impossible under combat stress and time pressure. Sweat drips into their eyes as they work. Metal scrapes against metal. Around them, the sound of battle continues without pause, a constant reminder that time is running out faster than solutions can be found. The weapon finally takes crude shape, untested and uncertain. The enemy is too close now, their presence overwhelming the defensive perimeter. It is 16:30 hours on April 16, 1945. Still on the Manila outskirts where the last organized resistance struggles, Hiroshi watches as American M4 Sherman tanks appear over the rise to the east, their engines roaring with mechanical power like beasts hunting down wounded prey. He feels a surge of anger rising in his chest, of betrayal at the thought of losing everything he has fought for through these long months. His men are spent beyond recovery, their energy completely drained by hours of continuous combat without food or adequate water. Hiroshi's chest tightens as he sees a tank barrel turning toward their position with deliberate intent. There is no escape route visible now, no flanking position to fall back toward. He grabs his rifle with both hands, checking the action automatically. This is his final stand, the last defensive line he will ever hold. The weight of that knowledge settles over him with strange calm. His makeshift weapon lies ready beside him, untested but representing the last hope for effective resistance. Around him, his men prepare themselves mentally for what comes next. Some check their weapons repeatedly. Others simply stare at the approaching enemy with expressions that reveal acceptance of fate. Miyamoto crouches nearby, his face set in grim determination despite the hopelessness of their tactical situation. The sergeant has been with Hiroshi since the beginning of the Philippine campaign, surviving when so many others did not. That shared history means something even now at the end. The American tanks advance in coordinated formation, maintaining proper intervals and supporting fire patterns. It is a display of superior doctrine and training that cannot be matched by depleted defenders. The roar of diesel engines grows louder with each passing moment. Hiroshi's fingers tighten on his rifle grip, seeking comfort in the familiar weight and balance. He thinks briefly of home, of family he has not seen in years, of a Japan that may not survive this war, regardless of individual sacrifice. Then he pushes those thoughts aside and focuses on the immediate tactical reality before him. The clash is intense and immediate when it comes. It is 17 hours on April 16th at 1945, amidst the ruins of what was once a functioning military position. Gunfire echoes through the broken buildings and shattered trees with overlapping reports. Hiroshi's makeshift weapon fires back at the American tanks, the hybrid machine gun spewing bullets toward the approaching enemy armor with desperate volume. His men fight beside him with fierce determination, pushing back against overwhelming odds, refusing to surrender while ammunition remains. It is chaos incarnate, sounds layering upon sounds, oppressive heat, and the desperate clatter of metal against metal. Tracers arc through the smoky air, drawing lines of light between opposing positions. The improvised weapon functions, at least initially, though its reliability remains uncertain with each trigger pull. Atsushi feeds ammunition into the mechanism, while Hiroshi aims and fires in controlled bursts. The weapon kicks hard against its improvised mounting, threatening to shake itself apart. For Japan, Hiroshi mutters under his breath, the words almost lost in the surrounding noise. But even as he speaks them, even as they leave his mouth with conviction, he knows deep in his core, this is not a fight they can win through determination alone. The mathematics of combat are brutally clear. American firepower superiority is absolute at this stage of the war. Their tanks advance despite the defensive fire, weathering the small arms resistance with minimal effect. The Sherman armor is too thick, too well designed to be penetrated by improvised weapons at this range. Hiroshi can see the futility even as he continues fighting, even as his hands work the controls and his finger pulls the trigger. Around him, defensive positions collapse one by one as ammunition runs out or soldiers fall to incoming fire. The tactical situation deteriorates with each passing minute. Smoke obscures visibility, making accurate fire nearly impossible. The smell of cordite and burning oil fills the air, choking and acrid. Miyamoto shouts something from his position, but the words are lost in the overwhelming noise. Hiroshi glances toward him and sees the sergeant still fighting, still maintaining his position despite everything. It is a small comfort in the chaos. A direct hit strikes their position without warning. It is 1830 hours on April 16th, 1945, and the broken defenses finally shatter completely. Hiroshi's body is thrown violently to the ground by the explosive force, his ears ringing with sudden deafness. His vision blurs and darkens at the edges, consciousness threatening to slip away. But his fingers still clutch his rifle with automatic reflex, holding on to the weapon even as everything else falls apart. Blood fills his mouth, copper tasting and warm, but he does not care about the wound. His crew is scattered across the position, some lying motionless in postures that tell their own story. The sound of tank engines advances again, closer now than before, unstoppable in their approach. Hiroshi knows with absolute certainty that this is the end, that no miracle will save them now. The mathematics have played out to their inevitable conclusion, but even now, even at the very end, he thinks of his duty and the record that must be kept. With trembling hands that barely respond to his will, he reaches for his diary where it lies nearby. The pages are stained and torn, but still functional. He manages to pull it close, to open it to the last written page. His hand shakes violently as he attempts to write, the pen barely making legible marks on the paper. Each word requires immense effort and concentration. The sounds of battle continue around him, but they seem distant now, separated from him by layers of shock and injury. He writes anyway, forcing the words onto paper because the record matters, because someone must know what happened here. Blood drips onto the page, mixing with ink and sweat. The handwriting is barely recognizable as his own, shaking and uneven, but the words take form regardless, testimony to what transpired in this place. His final thoughts crystallize into sentences that capture the essential truth. Around him, the battle reaches its conclusion. American forces secure the position with methodical efficiency. The resistance has ended. The diary remains clutched in his hand as consciousness fades. Hiroshi's men fall around him in the gathering darkness. It is 19 hours on April 16, 1945, and the ruins provide no more shelter or tactical advantage. There is no escape possible, no relief force that will arrive to change the outcome. Hiroshi knows with final clarity that the battle is lost, that all their efforts have delayed the inevitable but not prevented it. His final thoughts turn to his country, to the honor he sought to uphold, and to the men who followed him into the fire without question. The American advance has been thorough and professional, overwhelming defensive positions with combined arms coordination. Records would later document that Japanese casualties in this sector exceeded 80%, with surviving personnel taken prisoner or scattered into the jungle. The disparity in resources had been evident from the beginning, but orders had demanded resistance regardless of practical considerations. Hiroshi lies among the wreckage of his position, his body failing but his mind still processing the events with strange clarity. He thinks of the diary and the words he managed to write in those final moments. The record will exist, even if he does not, a testimony to what occurred here in this forgotten corner of a vast war. His crew gave everything they had, fighting beyond exhaustion and beyond hope because duty demanded it. Miyamoto lies nearby, his chest still rising and falling with shallow breaths. Other members of the crew have fallen silent. The weight of command settles on Hiroshi one last time, the responsibility for their lives and deaths. He led them here, followed orders that brought them to this end. American voices can be heard now, calling out in a language he does not fully understand. The sounds of battle have diminished, replaced by the organized movement of victorious forces securing their gains. Darkness continues to fall across the battlefield, shadows lengthening as the tropical sun sets. Hiroshi's vision narrows further, his body growing cold despite the humid heat. He holds on to consciousness as long as possible, unwilling to let go until the very end. Hiroshi's world is crumbling around him with inexorable finality. It is 20 hours on April 16th, 1945, and the final moments stretch out with strange temporal distortion. His body feels numb from the wounds sustained in the final assault, pain distant and abstract. But there is no fear in him anymore, that emotion burned away in the hours of combat. Only a sense of duty remains, the quiet realization that his fight cannot outlast the systems arrayed against him. The Japanese military doctrine had emphasized spirit and determination, believing these qualities could overcome material disadvantages. Hiroshi had believed this once, had trained under these principles, and led men according to these ideals, but the reality on this battlefield has proven otherwise with brutal clarity. Honor and courage matter, but they cannot deflect artillery shells or penetrate superior armor plate. The American system of warfare, built on industrial capacity and coordinated combined arms, has demonstrated its overwhelming advantage. Japanese positions across the Philippines have fallen steadily despite fierce resistance, despite individual acts of courage and sacrifice. The pattern is clear in retrospect. Hiroshi thinks of his tank, the Shinhoto Chiha, that served them for months before its final destruction. It was a good machine by the standards of its time, but that time had passed. The Americans brought M4 Shermans in numbers that Japanese forces could not match, supported by artillery and air power that controlled the battlefield. No amount of individual skill could bridge that gap. His makeshift weapon, the improvised hybrid creation, had functioned briefly but changed nothing in the larger equation. Innovation under pressure had its limits when the disparity was this great. Hiroshi's breathing becomes more labored, each breath requiring conscious effort. American medics move through the area now, checking casualties with professional detachment. Some Japanese, wounded, will receive treatment. Others are beyond help. Hiroshi is uncertain which category he occupies, and finds he does not particularly care about the answer. His duty has been fulfilled to the limit of his ability. The outcome was determined by forces larger than any individual commander or unit. Hiroshi writes one final diary entry, his hand shaking violently as he presses the pen to paper with fading strength. It is 21 hours on April 16, 1945, and these will be the last words he records. The page accepts the ink despite the trembling, despite the blood and dirt. Honor cannot outfight American systems, he writes with brutal honesty. The tide has turned beyond recovery. Each word requires immense concentration as his body fails around him. But the truth must be recorded, must be preserved for whoever finds this diary and reads these final observations. I have failed, the entry continues, the handwriting deteriorating with each line. Not in courage or determination, but in the mathematics of warfare. The admission costs him something to write, but dishonesty serves no purpose now. My men fought beyond what could be asked of any soldiers. They deserved better support than we could provide. His hand pauses, the pen hovering above the paper. He thinks of his crew, of Miyamoto and Atsushi, and all the others who followed orders to the end. They deserved victory, or at least survival, but received neither. The system that sent them into battle could not support them adequately against the opposition they faced. But I will die standing, Hiroshi writes as his final line, the pen forming the characters with stubborn precision. It is a small defiance, meaningless in tactical terms, but significant to him personally. He has not surrendered, has not abandoned his post or his duty. The diary entry ends there, unfinished thoughts trailing off as his strength finally fails completely. The pen falls from his grip, leaving a mark across the page. The diary remains open to these final words, a testament to one man's experience of battle and defeat. American soldiers would find it later, during their sweep of the area. The words would be read, translated, and filed away in some archive of captured documents. The diary would outlive its author by many decades, preserved as a primary source document of the Philippine campaign. The American forces have overrun the position completely by 22 hours on April 16, 1945. The fighting in this sector has ended with the elimination of organized resistance. Hiroshi's body is found among the wreckage of the defensive position, the diary still clutched in his hand with death's grip. His crew lies around him, some killed in the final assault, others wounded and receiving treatment from American medics. The tank, the Shinhoto Chiha that served as their home and fighting position for months, is destroyed beyond any possibility of repair or salvage. Intelligence officers collect documents from the position, including Hiroshi's diary, with its final entry still visible on the open page. The makeshift weapon he constructed lies nearby, its hybrid construction noted with professional interest by examining officers. The diary is tagged and placed in a collection bag, along with other captured materials. An initial translation would note the final entry's content, the acknowledgement that honor could not overcome systemic disadvantage. The observation would be filed in reports analyzing Japanese defensive capabilities and morale in the final stages of the Philippine campaign. Records indicate that this position had held for nearly 16 hours against overwhelming odds before final collapse. The delay imposed some cost on American advance schedules, but did not alter strategic outcomes. Japanese casualties matched earlier patterns, with survival rates remaining low for units committed to fixed defensive positions. The tactical lessons were clear to both sides. The war in the Philippines was reaching its inevitable conclusion. Japanese forces remained scattered across various islands, but organized resistance on Luzon had effectively ended by mid-April. American forces consolidated their positions and prepared for the next phases of the Pacific campaign. The individual battles, like the one Hiroshi fought, became footnotes in larger operational histories. The diary would be preserved in archives, one among thousands of captured documents. It would be examined occasionally by historians researching the period, its final entry quoted in academic works, analyzing Japanese military culture and the challenge of fighting against material superiority. Hiroshi's name would appear in casualty lists and unit records, a line item in the vast accounting of war. The remnants of Hiroshi's unit are processed by American forces over the following days. It is 12 hours on April 17, 1945, and the sun beats down on secured positions where prisoners are organized and wounded receive treatment. The diary is retrieved from Hiroshi's pocket by an intelligence sergeant who recognizes its potential value. The leather cover is stained with blood and dirt, but the contents remain legible for translation. The words are read aloud later that day in a field headquarters, translated by a Nisei interpreter handling documents with professional detachment. The final entry draws particular attention from the reviewing intelligence officer. Honor cannot outfight American systems. The tide has turned. I have failed, but I will die standing. The words are noted in the after-action report as evidence of Japanese awareness of their strategic situation. The entry marks not just the end of one man's life, but the birth of an enduring lesson about overwhelming technological and industrial advancement in modern warfare. The diary would be forwarded through intelligence channels, eventually reaching analysts in Manila and further rear areas. It would be read alongside hundreds of other captured documents, part of the larger effort to understand Japanese capabilities, morale, and strategic thinking. The makeshift weapon Hiroshi constructed would be examined by technical intelligence specialists interested in field modifications. Photographs would be taken, measurements recorded, and a brief report filed noting the hybrid construction and its apparent temporary functionality. The position where Hiroshi made his last stand would be cleared by engineer units, the wreckage removed, and the area secured. Within weeks, new vegetation would begin reclaiming the scarred earth. But the diary would endure in archives, its final entry preserved on paper and in translated form. Future historians would cite it when discussing the Philippine campaign, when analyzing challenges faced by Japanese forces, when illustrating the human cost of strategic miscalculation. The file would eventually be declassified decades later, made available to researchers studying the Pacific War. Hiroshi's final observation, that honor could not outfight American systems, would be quoted in books and articles examining the nature of modern warfare and the triumph of industrial capacity over individual valor. In the end, the diary provided what Hiroshi perhaps intended: a record of what occurred, an honest accounting of capability and outcome. The numbers had indeed rewritten the war. The file closed without comment. The documentation spoke for itself.